Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. Well, we've come to the end of World War I, but not the end of the game. We've still got the Russian Civil War to go, but it's not something that takes a long time though. It's kind of like the prequel. It's something that you can play pretty fast, right? And it kind of plays like the prequel, but we'll get to that later in the next video. I'm just going to spend most of this video talking about what's happened on the last turn of the game, and also talk to you about the victory conditions and who won. Let me see, got them right here. So as it comes as no surprise to me that the Central Powers won. So let's just, here, let me go to the other side there. So yeah, Bob was the guy that wrote the rules, basically, right? Like, he didn't start writing the rules, Will did. But Bob took over at some point and he wrote the rules. So he knew the victory conditions inside and out, and I didn't. And I've mentioned that in previous videos. And I don't feel bad about that. I wanted to learn how to play the game. I didn't want to get a whole bunch of information that I didn't need until the end of the game. But I left it too long. And so it's not a surprise to me that he's won the game. But you know, at the same time, I can see that with just a few different things that I do here or there that I could have won the game. Even though the score is a bit lopsided, that's something that I could have done. And we did play this yesterday, but we spent a long time talking about what happens now, and about the victory conditions, and about some of the things that happened in the game, and how we could make them better and things like that. So anyway, let's get to what happened in the last round. Okay, so if you remember from the last video, let me just set this down. What happened in the last video was at the beginning of this round. We always pull the cards and then we take a break, whether that's for an hour or for a week. So when we pulled the cards, one of the cards was the Spanish flu. And so what happened was any territory that had French or American units in it had to lose 3 units. Each nation had to lose 3 infantry class units. They couldn't go below 1 though. So if a territory only had 1 militia in it, then it still has 1 militia in it. But if it had 4 militia in it, then it's down to 1 militia, or 4 infantry down to 1 infantry, and so on, right? So you couldn't go below 1, but you had to lose 3. But not just any territory that you were in, it was any territory that was adjacent to you. So for instance, here in France here, they have Paris, right? And so the Germans lost here, 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 and here. They ended up losing 12 infantry class units because the French and the Americans that were there infected them. And if you wonder what's on Paris, this is what's on Paris right now. There's quite a bit of stuff there. So he didn't try to take Paris on his last turn, because with 12 units coming off, 12 infantry class units, that was something that that really hampered all of our ability to attack, right? So what he did do was he took Aquitaine, and so now he's got everything but Paris. And if the game were to continue, it would be a much easier for him to assault Paris now, because rather than the infantry units getting a bonus inside of a city there defending it, now all of the units inside of that city would be -1, because the city is surrounded and they're out of supply, right? But he ran out of time. The game just ran out, right? So that's basically all he did, other than over here, he convoyed me for as much money as he could for his sub. You see the British sub there. I decided, like, I had the British sub over here. I took it over here. I said, "You want to fight?" And he said no. So, you know, unless you have a fighter or a seaplane on maritime air patrol, you can't get that sub. So, you know, it was up to him, and he said no. So anyway, that's all he did as the Germans. He didn't do any other combat moves, I don't believe. I'm looking around. Yeah, that's all he did. So he did that, and he placed his units on it, and you know, like, you see what he's got on there, right? We didn't bother collecting our income because we can't spend it anymore. And in this game, it's like the 36 game in that you could you could have a variable ending, but we decided for the sake of this playtest and you know, like to give us some certainty in what we were doing here, that we would end it on the traditional date, November 11th, 1918. So the winter turn in 1918, this game, the fall winter turn, this game ended. Anyway, so that's what they did. The British, what did they do? I don't think that they were able to take any territory. They did try some attacks, like they tried to attack Afghanistan. They didn't take a thing off them for the second turn in a row. They just basically built up and moved around there. The Chinese decided that it wasn't worth attacking over there because, you know, like they're just that they didn't have overwhelming odds. They didn't have enough stuff there. And the artillery would have been -2, I believe, because they're in jungle. I think that's what it is. Anyway, so it wasn't worth for him to attack. But the British did. They did try to attack from Palestine to Syria. They ended up taking a few units off. And by the way, the Ottomans did attack them back, and they lost units. The British didn't lose units. So nothing much happened for the British. I don't believe they took any territories. I think that yeah, they did. They did attack from Greece up to here because that would have taken a point off the Ottomans, but they didn't get it though. In this round, it was the winter round, and so there was only one round of combat. Now, the British did not bother doing any amphibious assault here because they just didn't. Here's their boats right here. Again, they lost a lot of units, and you know, for them to be able to take something off there, for one thing, they might have been able to get one unit off, or sorry, one territory, maybe not. But like that, I could have maybe got a point off them. But really, that was a faint hope in order to do that. So I just didn't bother. Rather than do that, what I did do was I took a couple of transports up here to Kola and dropped off some units in here, because now the British are going to be helping the White Army fight the Soviet Red Army in the Russian Civil War. So I basically did that. I thought, okay, you know what, this isn't going to be a good idea. Let's just do what I can over here. And just about everybody on the board lend-leased to the Whites this time. So I did lend-lease a unit to them. The Americans lend-leased artillery. The Ottomans lend-leased a unit. The Austrians, did they? No, they didn't. The Austrians didn't. I think the Germans did, though. Anyway, we all kind of tried to bolster the Whites to try to stem the Red Army tide there. But yeah, the Germans were able to take this one out. I think I mentioned that. So the British didn't take any territory. Again, with the Spanish flu, there wasn't much they could do. The Austrians didn't do anything of consequence. They tried to attack northern Italy. They tried to attack there from Switzerland and from Austria, and they were unsuccessful. I think they lost a lot more units than they got. And he kind of made a mistake with Switzerland, although it's really of no consequence because there's no point involved in Switzerland. And you know, like Switzerland is worth an IPP, but Italy wasn't going to collect it anyway, because afterwards Italy on their turn, instead of attacking these guys, again, you only have one round, they weren't going to be successful, and so they attacked into here instead. They attacked Switzerland because that was a territory. I think it only had 3 units on it, so they were able to gain a territory, just a little bit of pride, right? So Austria did nothing. Then France, they did try one thing. You see the Cameroon down there. They had an infantry in Chad. They attacked the infantry in Cameroon, and I thought that was going to be a faint hope. I only had one round, and I had to hit a 2 or less. I hit a 1, yay! And that would have been a victory point for me, believe it or not. But then he hit me. So we both hit each other, and I wasn't able to take the territory. So he saved himself a point there, or he canceled a French point by doing that. So good for him on that one. Let's see who's next here. The Ottomans. The Ottomans, they didn't do anything of consequence either. They didn't take any territory. They tried that one attack, that was it, and they basically just moved units up into Afghanistan. They just moved them along, and of course moved them down there as well. And oh, they did try to attack Greece, but again, they only had one round. They were only going with militia. They lost units, and the British didn't lose any units. So then Russia. We'll get to Russia later. The Americans. What did they do? The Americans did nothing, and there's a reason for that. I'll talk a bit more about that afterwards. But the Americans just basically put stuff on and non-combat moved stuff over. I don't believe they did any attacks because there was nothing for them to attack. Again, Spanish flu, like it wiped out a lot of their units down there, and so there wasn't going to be much they could do. And besides, like there was no consequence to it. Even if I was to take a territory off of the Spanish not the Spanish, the Germans in Argentina, there was going to be no consequence to that because they either needed to take everybody out of South America, or because that's where the point, or they weren't going to get a point. So there was no point in doing that. And then Japan did something of consequence, and they actually gained a point for the Americans because the victory cities in the game, there's victory cities just like there is in 36. Washington isn't a victory city because it's too hard to take, right? And so the victory city for the Americans is Nanking here. And Japan came in and took Nanking off the Chinese. Where are we here? Somehow my dudes got moved around. There we go. So the Japanese took Nanking, and they moved a couple of artillery up just to make things a little bit harder on the Soviet Red Army. To try to take Primorsky Krai there, they moved a couple of artillery up. I kind of thought that, and we needed to think about that a little bit more. Like, do you think about how many units I could have moved in there? You see all those units in Korea there. This is Korea here. They could have moved all of that up there, but then the Russians would have had no chance. So I think what the rule was in the end is that you couldn't have more Japanese units in Primorsky Krai than American units, and so I think I've actually broken that. I think I'm going to have to move those two artillery up because there's only one American infantry in there, and there's Japanese infantry and two Japanese artillery, so I think I'm going to have to move those artillery out of there. So then Italy, I showed you what Italy did. They got Lend-Lease from the Americans, an artillery. They got Lend-Lease from them for the longest time now, that artillery unit, and they were able to take Switzerland. On my side, on the Allied side, the Italians did better than anybody. They've got all of their original territory. There's nobody's got a hope in hell of taking them out of there because of the amount of stuff they have in. If the game were to continue, you look and they've got Switzerland there. Well, they're right next to Germany now, and Germany's back door, and Germany doesn't have much there. Like they would have to assault Switzerland in order to defend themselves, because otherwise, like they would be going backwards, right? So that presented a real problem for them. And it was going to be hard for me to take Switzerland before. I was only able to take it now because he kind of made a mistake in taking stuff out of there. So there's that. And that's it. That's how the game ended. So let's get to the victory conditions. And these might not be the final ones, right? Like we've done this and we've actually changed some during the game and stuff. So these might not be the ones when the game is finally released. There's more play testing to go, and you can comment and let us know what you think of the conditions and what you think of anything for that matter. So there was for Germany there was 5 points available. Where's my pointing stick? We need a pointing stick here. La, 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 la. Here it is, right where I left it. So there's 5 points available to Germany for, it's called buffer and client states. So score one victory objective for each of the following Germany owns or has aligned at the end of the game. So we have Belgium, Warsaw, West Poland, that's this one here. Oh, sorry, let me start again. I wasn't looking at the camera. So Belgium, Warsaw, West Poland, Then all three of these, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, that's another one, and they have all three. And Western Ukraine. So where's Western Ukraine? This one here, this is Western Ukraine right here. I don't, actually they shouldn't have gotten that one, should they? Because that's something that the Austrians have. We're gonna have to take a point off there. Anyway, so there's another one, victory. Score one victory objective if Germany owns one of the following land zones at the end of the game: Picardy, or Alsace-Lorraine, or Southern England. And they have two of those, right? They have Picardy here, and they have Alsace-Lorraine. So that they got that point easily. Score one victory objective if Germany owns land zones that continuously connect German East Africa with German Cameroon or German South Africa. So you see there's this German territory here, and there's one there and one there. So you either needed to connect these two territories or these two territories. And clearly he didn't do that. So I think that's the only point I prevented from him. Global reach, score one victory objective if Germany has a naval base in a territory worth at least one IPP at the end of the game on the Pacific Ocean or can trace a supply path to southern Persia. I have southern Persia, and there's no railway there anyway. So he needed the naval base. He's actually got two of them. And that's my bad for not knowing the victory objectives. So there's one here, and that territory is worth a point. This territory is worth a point, and it's got a base as well. Like this one here, it's worth a point, but there's no base there, right? So, I mean, he could have put a base there if he'd lost the other two or something. But it wasn't worth me, I mentioned in the last video, it wasn't worth for me to put a bunch of transports down and move over there, because even by the time I got there, when he seen what I was doing, I probably couldn't have got him anyway. He's got 4 infantry there. That'd almost be impossible for me to assault. I would have needed like 5 transports, right? And it just wasn't worth for me to get that point off him. Plus, okay, so then the last thing, naval dominance. Score one victory objective if Germany has as many dreadnoughts as Britain in the Pacific Ocean, or more subs than Britain has destroyers. I've got more destroyers than he has subs, but he's got, there's a dreadnought here, and one, I didn't realize that. Britain's got 2 dreadnoughts here. I thought he had 2 dreadnoughts. I'm going to have to check with him on that. I only see 1 dreadnought, so maybe he didn't get that point. Oh, that's right. Yeah, we didn't give him a point for that. Okay, never mind. Anyway, so that's a point. But, okay. So then Germany got 5, 6, 7 points, plus they got Berlin, because that's a victory city. So 8 points altogether for Germany. They had a heck of a game. And when you look at this game, I mean, they should have won. You look at Germany's got all of their original territories, and they got lots of units. Austria's got all of their original territories and lots of units. And the same with the Ottomans, and they've actually expanded a bit too, right? So, you know, there's no question that they should have won the game under any metric. Okay, so Austria-Hungary, at the end of the game, they have all starting territories, and as I just showed you, they do. And the next one is take territory. Score one victory objective for each at the end of the game. There was 4 of them that were available. One of them was Romania, then Thessaly, then Macedonia, Northern Italy, Serbia, and Western Ukraine. And unfortunately, they couldn't get all of those because Ottomans had already had them. They were able to get Western Ukraine, so that was a point for them. But they weren't able to get the other ones because their partner had them, or, you know, like there's no way they were getting into Northern Italy with all those Italians. So they ended up getting 2 points, plus the city of Vienna is another point, so they got 3 altogether. Then the Ottomans, they got maximum points because score one victory objective for each of the following. Bulgaria, they have. Thessaly, they don't have. Macedonia, they do have. Southern Persia, they don't have. Northern Persia, they do have. Armenia, Transcaucasia, they have. Eastern Egypt and Cyprus. So, and and also any new territory that is worth 1 IPP or more and in a supply pass to Continental. They could have got lots of points there, but there was only a maximum of 4, so they couldn't get any more. So there's that, and there's also the city of Constantinople. So they got the maximum 5 points that they could, and that brought them to 16 points, although I'm thinking that should be down to 15 because of that Western Ukraine for the Germans. We'll see. Okay, Russia. Now, one of the reasons I didn't make this video yesterday was because we were wondering how to do all this, right? How do we incorporate the Russian Civil War? And then what do we do? You know, because the points are going to be unbalanced, I think, regardless of anything, if you take Russia out of it. Because you have the game, you had, you know, the Entente versus the Central Powers, right? And then all of a sudden you take away one of the Entente, and so now the Allies could not get up to 18 points, whereas the Central Powers could get to 18 points. So you kind of have to have the same point totals that you can both go for, right? So then I think what we decided on, and we'll play test it again, right, is that Russia, when Russia collapses, stop, take a look, see if they got any points, and then carry on after that, right? And so, like, their points, Crimea, Kiev, Warsaw, Transcaucasia, Western Ukraine, Primorsky, Kryer, Angelsk, they could get 3 points out of those, and they did end up getting the point. And then score 1 victory objective for any land zone Russia owns at the end of the game and did not own at the start of the game, worth at least 1 point. I don't think they had one of those. I can't think of one right now, because they didn't do any diplomacy, and they didn't take anything outside of Russia, I don't believe. At least they didn't have one at the end of the game, that's for sure. So you add 3 points and you put them in the bank, and then that's it for Russia, right? Then Russia at this point is on their own, and they go and collect a whole new set of points. And actually it's not Russia anymore, this is Russia that got those 3 points. Now you're talking about the Soviets. So the Soviets in the next phase of the game, if you play that phase of the game, now they're going to be going for their own points. Okay, so Britain. Destruction of the German Navy. Score 1 point, 1 victory objective at the end of the game. If Germany has no remaining dreadnoughts, has no more than 3 surface warships on the board, and does not have possession of either of the 2 channel ports. So I couldn't do that, of course, because he's got possession of the channel ports here. There's 2 of them. And they have a dreadnought. Oh, here we go. They have a dreadnought. And they have more than 3 surface warships. But that was one of the things that we talked about this morning. Because the import rules for ships. And I was thinking about that all night, and I finally came up with something this morning. Hang on, I got to drink my coffee here. One of the things that we came up with was we found that strategic bombing in this game wasn't really a thing, right? Like when you consider the cost of developing strategic bombing technology and purchasing the bombers versus just buying infantry and artillery. Like I developed strategic bombers with the Americans just because I get so many dice with the Americans. I had, you know, what else was I going to go for? So I went for strategic bombers. And I did buy a couple of strategic bombers at the end of the game, right? Like they didn't even move. I just purchased them and put them on just because I thought it would look cool to have couple of strategic bombers. But we couldn't find a good use for them. And, you know, like a good use that was worth the money. They do damage facilities, and they damage factories, obviously, like they're supposed to. But really, I mean, like I said, the cost of doing all that, and then, you know, like he did have a Zeppelin to start the game off with. He did try to do a strategic bombing run against me, and I ended up blowing him out of the sky because, you know, like, so you spend all that money, develop all that technology, and then you get hit by an anti-aircraft gun. Well, you know, so how do you make it worth it? One of the points that he got, like these ships here that you see here, I could not touch these ships. At the end of the game, like on my last turn, I had planned to take the French Navy in here and take them out, and then take the American Navy in and finish them off, right? And that would have taken out his dreadnought, and it would have been difficult because he's got this coastal gun here. So I would have lost a lot, but I didn't care about that. I didn't care about what I had left. I just wanted to get this dreadnought, but I didn't have the option, right? Unless I would have forced a port with the optional rules, but really a faint hope, because then every one of my ships going in there has to roll a 4 or more. Like if they roll a 3 or less, then they're dead. They don't even take part in the combat. So not really a thing. But what we did was we tried to root a rule that a rule that was rooted in the 36 game. In the 36 game, when you're trying to surround a city, if you were to damage the air base, and you were to damage the ports, then or blockade the ports, then that city was surrounded. So what if you could damage the naval base there? Like take in a couple of strategic bombers. So that was a good idea, because that all of a sudden gives you something more to do with your strategic bombers. Like this is kind of cheesy that you can get a point guaranteed almost that the other player can do nothing about, right? And so that kind of fixes two things in the game. One, it brings strategic bombing into the game, that strategic bombers and the airships and the Zeppelins. Gives them another thing to do, which is actually pretty valuable, because it was frustrating in this game, with all the ships being hidden in port everywhere, that to try to have naval battles, right? Like a guy just goes and hides in port, and basically, it's just not worth it for you to go in and take a run at his mines first and then try to fight his ships, right? So that seems to be something that could be a good thing to do. It adds another level of strategy to the game, and so that's going to be part of the next playtest. We're not going to retroactively go back and do it. World War I is over here. So anyway, that was the first one. They didn't get that point. The Spoils of the Dying. Score 1 British victory objective at the end of the game. Britain has Constantinople or more dreadnoughts than any other nation in the Mediterranean. And again, same thing. He's got this dreadnought in the Mediterranean. So there was no point in me putting that dreadnought there in the Mediterranean. I was able to put it here to make sure that I had more dreadnoughts than he did, right? But putting it into the Mediterranean would have done me nothing, because this guy here is covered. Like you can't attack him basically in port. You can, but it's deadly to do that. However, if I had a couple of strategic bombers or something in Thessaly there, like in Greece, then different story, right? Anyway, Pacific Security. Score 1 victory objective if Britain possesses both Hong Kong and Malay, and it has at least one dreadnought in the Pacific Ocean. So, Japan took back Hong Kong, which gave it back to the British, and they never did lose Malay in the game. It's down there at the bottom there. So they have those, and they, on the last turn of the game, they sailed that damaged dreadnought over and put it in the Pacific Ocean. So they got 1 point. There you go, that's their first point. Africa. Score 1 victory objective if Britain ends the game in possession at least 2 German colonies in Africa. And I've done that. You can see the 2 pies there on the white looking territories. One there and one over there, so that's 1 point. So that's 2 points for the British. And then oil. Score 1 victory objective if Britain has southern Iraq or Syria and southern Persia. So I do have southern Iraq here, and I have southern Persia. So that's a point. So, and then London. London was worth a point as well. So the British got 4 points. France. Score 1 victory objective if the Allies possess Berlin. Yeah, far from it. Oil. Score 1 victory objective if France possesses Syria or southern Iraq. They don't. Maintain the empire. Score 1 victory objective if at the end of the game France has all its starting territories and colonies. Far from it. And then score 1 victory objective for each former Ottoman or German land zone France possesses that is not part of their home country. Now, they would have got a point there, because you can see that French roundel down there. They took out a German territory very early in the game. However, when when it was time to get Italy to join one side or the other, there was a rule in there that you could grease them, like make some kind of incentive for the Italians to join your side. You had to give them to this territory here, which I did, and you had to forego one victory objective at the end of the game. So the one victory objective that the French did get, they lost because of that, because of the trade-off of getting, and of course I think it was worth it, getting the Italians on their side. Although when I did do the roll, I had a really good roll and I didn't need to do that. So, you know, but you don't know that before you roll the dice, right? And then Paris, I still have Paris, so the French did get that 1 point. So then the US, score one victory objective if the US loses less than 10 land units and less than 2 capital ships in the game, or the war ends with the alliance total victory less than 3 points different. None of those things happened. They lost less than 2 capital ships, but with the Mexicans being so strong, like they would have lost a lot of units over there, right? So, and then of course the Spanish flu hit. I think I lost more than that many units there. Monroe Doctrine. Okay, so obviously I didn't get the Monroe Doctrine. You had to have North, Central, and South America in Allied control, right? And there's with Chile and Argentina going to the Germans so late in the game, there was no way that I was ever going to get that back. So I didn't get that point. Pacific Security. Score one victory objective if the U.S. has more dreadnoughts than Japan and owns all of the Pacific Islands it began the game with. So they do. They have all their islands, and they have 3 dreadnoughts. Japan has 2, even though Japan's on their side. So they've got 1 point there. Global dominance. Score one victory objective if at the end of the game the USA is at war with the Central Powers, has 18 or more land units in Europe and more dreadnoughts than Great Britain. They got that point. Because, remember I was saying the Americans didn't attack, and they did it for a reason. They lost a lot of their units again, you know, with the Spanish flu. So at the end, they were able to bring these units over here to Europe, and that gave them 19 units in Europe, because there's those units, and there's these units, and then there's these units in Paris right here. That gave them 19 units, and they were at war with the Central Powers, and they had more dreadnoughts than the British. And that's it. So the final score, Central Powers 16, the Entente 11, although I think that might be 15-11. Now, that's not the end of the game. There's a point for France, or a point for Britain, and a point for the Germans available in the Russian Civil War. And of course, then there's the Soviet Red Army. They've got a chance to get up to 12 points. And the way we've got it now, and probably the way it'll end up, because I tell you, this has been a real stretch to try to wrap your mind around how can we incorporate 2 games in one, because this is really a game in its own, this Civil War. Like who controls what, and you know, one of the things that we definitely concluded, and we're still going to do it anyway because there's only 2 of us, but that you really needed 3 players to play with this expansion in the game, the Russian Civil War, because it's kind of a conflict of interest. Like, I'm going to be playing the British here, and I'm going to be playing the Russians, or sorry, the Soviets, and it's kind of a conflict there, right? Because you know, like I get a point as the British, so I want the British to do well, but I'm also playing the Russians, and I want to do well with them as well, right? And you might wonder, okay, well, why play the game if the Russians can't win the game? They can win the Civil War. What they can't do is win World War I. Once they collapsed, they were no longer a part of the Allies, and so they were no longer a part of World War I. So there's no way that they could win World War I. I mean, if their victory objectives at their collapse added to the Allies and they'd won that war, then you could say that the Russians were part of that victory. Of course you could say that. But the question of why continue then is because this isn't the end after the Russian Civil War even. There is a transition. I've seen the document and I'm sure it'll change. But there are rules that transition this game to Global War 1936. And they look pretty good. We'll see. It's something that you obviously have to test and everything, right? You don't want to just throw it out there. But that's why you would do that. Like if you were the Russian player and you're the Russian player in 1936, then you're going to want to do as well as you can. You're going to want to get as many victory points as you can so that you can start the other game in a better position. Now, it's not going to vastly change. Basically, it kind of, you know, to simplify it, it kind of boils down to if you've done this well, then you get this much money to spend, you know, or this many units on the board. It's not going to say, okay, you all of a sudden get this territory or that territory or something like that. Like that, I think that the starting borders are going to be the same. It's just that when you get to 1936, you get to put a couple bucks more worth of stuff on or something, or a couple more units, depending on how well you did, right? And there's different varying degrees of how you win this war as well. Like there's total victory, and then there's partial victory. I think this the score would qualify as a partial victory. I'm not sure, but how the victors do it. So like Germany, if they got a partial victory, then they get a certain amount. But if they got a total victory, then they get more than that. And so you would be starting World War II in a better position if you won this game, an even better position if you won the game in a total victory as opposed to a partial victory. Now what I have to do is I have to make some changes to the board here. Like the Central Powers are going to come out of Russia here. The Roundels are going to come out, although they're still going to be controlled, but their units are going to come out. And there's going to be a couple of French units put into Crimea. And so the French will be controlling that. One of the things I forgot to mention to you was what happened in Finland. And I can't be blamed for that because the Civil War here in Finland there was only one Russian unit here, right? One Russian infantry. And the artillery hit them. They were here and they hit them with the artillery. And so the Russians or the Soviets didn't even roll in the Finnish Civil War here, and so it was a kind of a non-event. But now that World War I is over, we're going to change that. Before, once this happened, then Finland was a no-go zone. Basically, they were a neutral that couldn't be attacked. But now we're going to change that. We're going to make it a little bit more exciting. We're going to play test it that way anyway. And Finland's going to be a part of this. So if the Russians decide to attack them, then the Germans are going to control them. And they're a minor power, so you know you count up the territories and you try to hit that number with a dice. And if you do, then you get either an infantry or two militia, right? So so that's going to be a part of it. These guys here in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, they're going to not be Germans anymore. They're going to be German controlled. So these roundels will come off the board, and I've got some German control markers. You might wonder if you've seen them on the HBG website, what the German control, the French control, the British control markers were for. This is what it was for this expansion here. And so the roundels come off and those go on. The Germans are going to control Poland. The Austrians are going to control the Ukraine. And then like here, the Ottomans are going to control the whites that have this will be changed to an Ottoman control roundel. These Ottomans will come off the board because there's no whites there, right? So they don't get to keep those territories. And then the British, whatever you see, like with the British roundels there, they've got 4 territories right now. So when the British turn comes around during the Civil War, like they don't take a regular turn, they just take a Civil War turn. They will roll the dice and try to hit a 4 or less, and that's their recruitment roll. And if they get it, then they can put a unit on one of these things, right? And plus, each of the nations gets $6 to buy something for the whites, right? Or for themselves. They can buy it for themselves, but just like in the prequel, it costs double for land units if they want to buy it for themselves, or they can buy them straight up for the whites. Anyway, that's it. If you want to know what happens in the Civil War, and I encourage you to do that because it looks like it's going to be fun, then join us. The Civil War is going to go on for up to 7 turns, and we'll talk more about what that means up to, or how will it end early and all that kind of stuff. But thanks for joining my friend Bob and I in refighting the World War One. And I apologize to all you people that live in the free world that I was not able to put down the Central Powers. I will do better next time, I promise. Anyway, take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade out.